If you live in America, you have probably felt this. A surprise bill hits your mailbox. Your childcare quote looks like rent. And one bad month can erase years of work. Now here is the part that stings. Norway is also a capitalist country. Norway also sells energy to the world. But the average Norwegian does not live with the same constant financial panic. So people ask one simple question. Is it just oil? Is Norway basically cheating? Stay with me, because the truth about Norway's oil wealth is not what Americans think it is. And the most important detail is the one almost nobody talks about. Here is the mystery we are going to solve today. Norway has the world's famous oil fund. It sits at roughly $1.8 trillion, meaning it is nearly $2 trillion in plain language. So why does Norway still argue about budgets like every other country? If Norway is sitting on that much money, why not just cut taxes and live like kings? Why not make everything free forever? That question sounds obvious. But the answer exposes the real system. And by the end, you will see why Americans misunderstand Norway's oil wealth so consistently. The myth Americans believe. Let's bust the first myth. A lot of Americans picture Norway like Alaska, but bigger. They imagine every citizen gets an oil dividend check. They imagine the government just hands out cash. That is not the core story. Norway's famous fund is not a personal allowance. It is a national savings and investment machine. Norway's sovereign wealth fund is the government pension fund global. It is managed with extreme transparency. It is designed to turn temporary oil revenue into long-term national wealth. Here is the key. Norway tries not to flood its own economy with oil money. Instead, it invests most of it outside Norway. That helps prevent the economy from overheating. That helps keep other industries alive. Here is a question I want you to answer honestly. If the United States created a national fund like this tomorrow, would it survive 10 years untouched, or would it get raided in the first crisis? Right, untouched or raided, then tell me why. The hidden math behind the rule. Norway has something America struggles to sustain. A rule that limits temptation. Norway's framework is often summarized as a 3% guideline tied to the fund's expected real return over time. That number is not a promise of spending. That number is a restraint on spending. One detail needs to be crystal clear. The 3% is a ceiling, not a floor. In years where inflation is hot, or the economy is running too fast, Norway can argue for spending less than the guideline to avoid overheating. This is the discipline Americans often miss. Norway's oil wealth is built to be boring. Boring is how it survives. Oil still matters more than people admit. Now let's correct the opposite myth too. Some people say oil no longer matters in Norway. That is also misleading. Petroleum exports still dominate Norway's export profile. In recent years, petroleum products have remained roughly between 55% and 62% of total export value after the 2022 to 2023 price spike normalized. So oil is still a giant lever in the system. But the real story is what Norway does next. Norway converts resource income into financial assets. Then Norway limits the political access to that money. America often fights about whether government should do more. Norway built a mechanism that forces government to think long-term. The real trade, taxes versus private bills. Here is where the "oil did it" story collapses. Norway does not fund its society with oil alone. Norwegians also pay more tax, broadly speaking. Here is the updated reality that matters. Norway's tax-to-GDP ratio is roughly 44.3%. The United States sits around 27.7%. So Norway is not just a bit higher. Norway is meaningfully higher. So if an American says, "I want Norway's services," the Norwegian response is basically, "Then you need Norway's revenue model too." That is the hidden math. You pay more collectively, so you bleed less privately. In America, you might keep more money from taxes. But you can lose it later to healthcare premiums, surprise bills, childcare costs, and unpaid time off. Healthcare, the American cost monster. This is the cleanest comparison. The United States spends more per person on healthcare than any peer country. In the latest OECD framing, US per capita health spending is around $14,885, and in many US reports it has effectively crossed the $15,000 psychological line. So the earlier number was not aggressive. It was conservative. Now the Norway comparison is not Norway spends nothing. Norway spends plenty too. But the lived experience is different. In the United States, healthcare is often tied to your job. Losing a job can mean losing coverage. Even with coverage, the billing can still feel like gambling. In Norway, the financial stress profile is different. That difference is policy design. That difference is not a magical oil fairy. If you like comparisons that actually show the math, subscribe to Nexora. This channel is a research journey about quality of life, not ideological fan fiction. We test myths, we show trade-offs, and we keep the purpose human. Sick pay and parental leave. Risk changes behavior. This is where Norway's model changes daily life. Because when risk is buffered, people make different decisions. Norway's sick pay structure includes an employer-paid period at the start, commonly described as the first 16 days, and the system can support long-term sick leave up to about 52 weeks under defined rules. That means illness is less likely to become instant financial collapse. In America, there is no universal paid sick leave guarantee. So the math becomes brutal. You work sick or you lose pay. You skip care or you gamble on cost. Norway's parental leave options remain the standard headline. Parents can choose about 49 weeks at 100% compensation or 59 weeks at 80% compensation, subject to caps and eligibility rules. That is not just a family perk. That is a labor market stabilizer. Norway is not free money. Norway is insured life. It is the difference between a tightrope and a bridge. Childcare, the silent middle-class budget killer. Americans underestimate how much childcare shapes everything. It shapes who works. It shapes who has kids. It shapes whether you can move for a better job. Norway uses a capped price approach for kindergarten fees. In the most recent policy direction, the maximum fee has been pushed down dramatically, with widely cited caps around 1,200 Norwegian kroner per month for a full-time spot, replacing older higher caps like 2,000 Norwegian kroner seen in earlier snapshots. That shift is not cosmetic. That is a household budget revolution. This is another place where Americans say, oil did it, but that skips the mechanism. The mechanism is taxes plus policy plus price caps. Oil adds stability, but the state still chooses the structure. Here is another common question I actually care about. If your state capped childcare costs like Norway, would it save your budget tomorrow, or would it make you worry about quality and waitlist? Write save or worry, then name your city. The Nordic labor model, high wages without one universal minimum wage. Now we hit the part Americans rarely understand. Norway has high wages, but it does not rely on one simple lever. Norway does not have a single universal statutory minimum wage across every job. Instead, wage floors are often set through collective agreements, and in some sectors there are legally enforced minimum rates tied to specific industries. Here is the core idea. In Norway, wages are not only an individual negotiation. Wages are a system negotiation. In the United States, union membership is around 10% of workers in the most recent year. Private sector union membership is lower, but the overall figure stays near that 10% line. That means most American workers negotiate mostly alone. Now compare the coverage concept. Union membership is one thing. Collective bargaining coverage is another thing. In Nordic-style systems, a larger share of workers have pay and conditions shaped by collective agreements, even beyond formal union membership. That coverage effect creates wage compression. That compression protects the lower and middle wage bands. This also changes how time works. When bargaining is coordinated, schedules become more predictable. Overtime becomes more expensive. Burnout becomes a collective issue, not a private shame. So yes, Norway has oil. But Norway also has institutions that protect bargaining power. The mystery answer, why they cannot spend it all. Remember our mystery. If Norway has nearly $2 trillion, why not spend it all? Because Norway treats oil wealth as a one-time conversion. Oil is underground capital. They convert it into a global portfolio. Then they try to live on the return, not the pile. That is the truth Americans misunderstand. Norway's oil wealth is not a cheat code. It is a discipline system. And here is the uncomfortable mirror. America's constraint is not only money. America's constraint is governance trust. If the United States had a similar fund, the first fight would be immediate. Who controls it? Who gets the benefits? Who protects it from election cycles? Norway built broad agreement around rules. That agreement is the rare resource. So here is the clean takeaway. Norway's oil wealth matters, but it does not explain Norway by itself. Norway pairs resource income with strict spending discipline, high tax capacity, and broad risk protection. America keeps taxes lower by comparison, but often pushes risk onto households through private bills and fragile safety nets. If you want the next chapter in this series, watch the next Norway versus USA video after this one. We will break down what middle class actually means in both systems, using real budgets. Also, I will be in the comments for the first 2 hours after this drops. If you ask a specific math question, I will answer with the cleanest explanation I can. Question of the day. Would you accept Norway-style higher taxes if it guaranteed Norway-style protection from healthcare and childcare shocks? Or would you rather keep the American model of lower taxes with higher personal risk? Pick one side and defend it in one paragraph.